Okay. Hi, Leah. We still got some audio, folks connecting to audio. I apologize. The last one ran a little long, so we're starting a little late. I'm gonna text, yes, we're in here now. Okay, not as late as when I showed up to that dinner in Las Cruces, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Hi, Sydney.
Hey guys,
Hi.
I thought maybe I had done something wrong.
No, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Hello, welcome. We'll just give folks I imagine there might be a few folks who were waiting and then saw that it was, and now have to click on it again, perhaps wandered away. So we'll just sort of slow roll it. I'm gonna go ahead and send a quick email to Daryl as well, just to let him know that we are starting. All right. Okay, here it is. Um, okay, so we'll give that a few minutes and yeah, we'll just sort of kick it off and see if Daryl can join. But thank you very much for coming in and I guess good evening now at this point. It's 5:30, so it's officially evening. And we're very happy, very excited to be talking about cooperatives, collectives, joining together as artists and creatives in different ways. And for folks who don't know the deal with this event, my name is Mike. I work for an organization called Creative Startups, and we are working with the New Mexico EDD, Economic Development Department, to come up with a plan for the new Creative Industries Division, which is a new division of the EDD designed to support folks making a living. Oh, here he is. Hey, Daryl. Welcome. Yeah, it's a new division of the Economic Development Department, um, designed to support folks making a living in the creative economy. So, one of the ways that folks can make a living in the creative economy is to band together with other folks trying to make a living in the creative economy. And so very excited to be joined here by three practitioners, experts, thinkers of that notion to talk about how do we do it, pros, cons, New Mexico specific strategies. So we'll just kick right into it. We've got Sydney Counce, manager of Dust City Opera and co-founder of New Mexico Music Workers, joining us here today to talk, I'm guessing, mostly about the New Mexico Music Workers part, but also shout out to Dust City Opera playing Bueno Fest on Thursday night in Albuquerque. I also realized that I've never said your last name out loud before. Did I get it?
You nailed it.
Oh, I
You
did?
got it
Okay,
right.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us here, Sydney, and would love to hear a little bit about New Mexico Music Workers and just all the work you've been doing.
Great. Thanks for having me. And I'll just jump right in. So again, my name is Sydney Counce. I'm a music business professional living in New Mexico, and I serve clients all around the state and the country as an agent, manager, publicist, producer, lots of roles, but I'm probably best known for my role as artist manager for Albuquerque-based group Dust City Opera. I have over a decade's experience in business management, and I bring all of this into my work with New Mexico Music Workers, which is a newly formed collective of musicians and industry workers who have banded together to support and advocate for music workers' rights around the state. So my colleagues and I came together to form New Mexico Music Workers out of a sheer necessity. This came after years of witnessing a lack of a unified organization that could address many concerns we've been facing in our sector, but particularly those, oh gosh, I'm getting all of these pop-ups.
Oh, don't worry about it. I
Sorry,
put it in.
okay,
Yeah, you're good. It's just a little poll for folks at
okay,
their convenience. Yeah, I'm
awesome,
sorry.
thanks.
You're
That's
good.
okay.
Yeah.
So we developed this to address some concerns in our sector, but particularly those that were amplified in the post-pandemic economy. And these concerns include things like a lack of equitability and sustainability for gig workers in New Mexico, a lack of advocacy and public awareness of the role music workers play as economic drivers, and really the overall validity of music work as real work. So our mission, again, is to support and advocate for music workers living in rural and urban communities across New Mexico through the development of resources and networks by and for music workers. And those resources aim to provide transparency, education, and a mutual understanding between all of our music workers and the general public. These are things like sharing industry knowledge and experiences, crowdsourcing and standardizing things like performance contracts, advance forms, split sheets, really any documents and agreements that are common within our industry. And this also includes things like industry awareness. And when I say awareness, I'm talking about within the creative industry, but also the general public. So in our short time working on this project, we have found that there is this fundamental lack of understanding of what leads to the production of good live music events. These are things from practicing to promotion, to lighting, to venue staff, to problem solving day of, all on the industry side. But also there is this blind spot with the general public of what the cost is for producing live shows and that relationship to ticket prices. So we believe that if the public, including decision makers, legislatures, the economic development department, have a better awareness and understanding of the financial value of our work, they'll be more inclined to support us through things like ticket sales and public funding through grants and sponsorships. So focusing our collective power on addressing the public awareness is a critical component in helping us with negotiations and setting our rates and really helping audiences understand ticket pricing and things like that. So with all of that in mind, our cooperative's goals come down to helping cultivate this mentality of abundance by bringing together music workers on both sides of the table. So we're talking about buyers and sellers, which are our venues and presenters and promoters, and the bands and artists that they hire to create innovative models together to support equitable and sustainable music careers for everyone in our industry in New Mexico. So some of the prompts that we were given for this as panelists was to offer some insight into starting collectives and some of the pros and cons. So anyone on this call, if you're considering starting a collective, the first thing I would recommend is seeing what collectives already exist that may be addressing the needs that you're facing. The work that New Mexico Music Workers is doing is not new, and we're seeing it happen in markets all over the country. But we wanted to create something by and for New Mexicans, given our unique challenges and needs, like our remoteness when it comes to booking tours and our lack of funding for performing arts compared to other states. I'd say the biggest challenge we have faced with New Mexico Music Workers is keeping our volunteer members engaged without funding. So all of us at New Mexico Music Workers are volunteers, and even those of us who have this deep desire to spend time on this very much needed work, we have families to feed. And without funding, many of us are forced to prioritize other work. And I think that this is a direct reflection of the lives of creative artists in our community. We often find ourselves overlooked for funding opportunities, or we face barriers to funding, such as needing a pass-through agency, unlike our traditional artist counterparts, or even things like access to internet to apply for funding, or being overlooked altogether as a valid work form. And yesterday, I heard a panelist say that the creative arts in New Mexico are one of the biggest economic drivers in the state. But then later in that same discussion, that same person failed to recognize performing artists as job creators because of the lack of data around gig workers' contributions to the economy. So there is this disconnect between our real value in stimulating the economy and the data to support that work. And so that is something that New Mexico Music Workers aims to address. Okay, let's talk about pros. I would say the pros of forming a collective is a laundry list. We have a thriving creative arts community, and I've had the honor of meeting and networking with and learning from so many talented creators all across New Mexico in the very short amount of time that New Mexico Music Workers has been around. So there is almost no downside to joining forces across the creative community. And those of us in it are particularly good at taking care of one another and sharing our knowledge without it feeling competitive. And I feel that we have a real true desire to see one another succeed. So there are lots of pros to forming that collective. And I would encourage anyone on this call, if you're interested, to please sign up for New Mexico Music Workers. I can drop a link or have Mike drop a link to our collective in the chat shortly. And thank you again for including me on the panel. And I hope that I can answer questions if we have time at the end, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That was super comprehensive, Sydney, and I really appreciate you. And I'm just quickly struck by just the triangulation of all the things you said around transparency of information within your creative art, right? Music is music, but it's really no different. You know, it's like these are things that travel informally, right? Like, hey, how much did they pay you? Like, oh, they paid me this, like what, you know,
Exactly.
and formalizing that. And then one thing you said that I just think is so incredibly important, helping the public understand how expensive certain creative practice or art is. You know, they think, oh, it's you just go up there with your guitar. This must be easy, right? And then the third thing is the lack of data, right? And how all three of those things are connected. And I just, yeah, I mean, that's such an important point, the power of sort of cooperation to assume that data and collection role and whatnot. So I'm really, yeah, that's really cool. And what
Thank
y'all are
you.
doing is super cool.
Thank you so
And
much.
we'll just keep rolling along. And we got some different examples of collectives and cooperatives here tonight, which I think is pretty cool. There are other adjectives out there besides cool, but I'm not going to use any of them. We've got a person I was very privileged and honored to meet out when I went to Zuni in January, Daryl Shack, who is joining us here, an artist and a member of the Ancestral Rich Treasures of Zuni Cooperative, which is a really interesting effort. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Daryl to tell us a little bit about that cooperative and about sort of his experience as an artist. So thank you for joining us, Daryl.
Oh, absolutely. And can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right. Kishin got the now one there, okay. Daryl Shacklet, as a formal greeting. I want to introduce myself to you. And first and foremost, my clans also down Pichi Gualan Chale. So I'm a corn and born for the raven. So I might eventually eat myself one of these days. So but I'm an artist. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a community advocate. I've world traveler. If I could add that, I think I really enjoy what I've done through artistry. I'm a performing artist, so Sydney, I kind of really hear what you're saying about a lot of the things you mentioned, packing up and going to different venues to go and perform. I mean, and not just us, but our families going along. It's so much, and but getting into what I do as an artist, I'm a fetish carver, I'm a painter, I'm a poet. I do just about anything, and I think that's really how this cabinet really helps support what I do and what we do here in our community. Just a little bit about Zuni. This is where artistry is born in silversmithing and fetish making. Fetishes are small animal carvings, and so I've been doing that for a little over 20 years. I've been blazing trails through eBay and uh, trying to set it up through there so that I could find different pathways, and then at the same time I was doing social work with our senior center here as an activity director and getting people to do things they're not normally used to doing, but I got them to do it. They liked it. And at the same time, I also had to find ways to really get to move my art, because here in this community, they've calculated that there's at least maybe 80% of our homes that have at least one artist. And in my home, we're above average. We have like about five, you know. So it really makes a difference. How do we find homes? And one of the biggest questions I've come across that was interesting that I found on social media, asking artists in general and fetish carvers specifically, they asked us, do you sit down to make this artistic piece with intentions of actually finding a home for it? And quite frankly, my answer is really give and take, yes and no, because art's art. But then my continual challenge was, how do we find homes again for these animals and for these creations that are my people make? And so that was one of the biggest things that I've uh, had to endure. And talk about enduring. I've seen my parents 55 years plus silversmithing, and I've seen them go through a lot of different places where they get beat down on price, and they have to hash it out with buyers who are not so I guess let's not go there, but it was a nice business. It's not a nice business out there. And so to X that out of my life, I think we've had to try different avenues to try. And thank God for social media. Thank God for collectives. I mean, they hosted a meeting one day. They wanted to know how the community could help artists. And so initiative was brought in with the Art Place America grant with $250,000 that was able to help our community. And that helped to spark up Art Walk. And so I became president of Art Walk, and we hosted another real good shows here, and we still do, and whenever I sit down and at my home when I'm working, it's art walk for me. And so I'm able to share that type of lifestyle with, visiting tourists and other community members who might be interested. It's a good way for other youngsters to learn also. And so we first formed this small collective, and, it's tough forming collectives. We did start with about 25 members, and eventually with all the bombardment of meetings and almost sometimes rhetoric, it's almost the same thing with no movement at some points, but it does move, when you get to a certain situations where you all get used to each other. I think that's what's always missing. And then numbers dwindle down, and with about 25, we actually ended with about 7 of us on Art Walk to spark off our initiative event, which was very successful. And eventually we ended with about 15 pre-COVID. So that was not a good time. But at the end now, we're just getting back together. Art Walk is still alive, but at the same time, we incorporated as a co-op too. So that was a good thing. Many artists here feel that there's nowhere to sell our things. But only at a few places that, again, it's really hard to break through the market. So some of our new artists have to have that little bit of training and little bit of know-how, which I've learned all myself. I think for the most part they have to skip out on all the. While we are happy that we help them skip out on all the things that we went through, and so a lot of veteran artists are in the co-op, and we've been able to connect with the Zuni Youth Enrichment Program here, and we work closely with the students there, and they get to sell their stuff in our co-op, and it's a real good thing. It brings families together, it brings customers together, it brings ideas together, it brings a lot of really good wheels turned to make this thing work. And I think for people that want to start collectives, leadership is important. For those people that think about what kind of leader, I think that goes beyond my views sometimes, because you got to be a go-getter is what I say, especially in the real tough market that I broke through. When I first started, they told me when I took my little box of animals, the buyer told me, "Oh, Daryl, there's 500 other bear carvers here in the community. What are you gonna do to make yours different?" Closed my box and basically had to walk away, but it made my wheels turn. And so being different and a little bit unique was very exciting to learn at that young point. And further on, I was very thankful with Art Walk and the University of New Mexico and the Indigenous Planning and Development Institute. They were able to teach us place knowing. I think that made a big difference in learning about what do we have here at Zuni, and does a collective work? And certainly it did. We were able to collect these artists and have them host different things that they do in their home in regards to their art. And our plans were that artwork was going to be a destination in 10 years, and we're really close. Our Zuni co-op and those type of things, it helps because it also brings a lot of different artists together that have different backgrounds, and especially the know-how. um I'm computer literally, but not so much. Zoom's something new for me. I do it, but not so much. I think I fail in some points where a lot of my other counterparts whom I work with can pick up the slack and help me to succeed. And I think that's a real big plus. So the incorporations for our group was in 2018, and so far so good. Just the other meeting, we signed on with our lease for another 3 years. So that's how confident we are, you know. So I just want to let we promote authenticity, which is definitely a big issue for us nationwide, worldwide. And so that's why we're a collective. It helps all of us to promote that message that, made in Zuni is something special. You get something unique like this ring here that my wife made, and the jewelry that we wear, the stuff that we make. I mean, I'm very proud of that. And however way I can help our community to spread that word to the rest of the nation and the world and our peoples, I'll do so. But I want to thank you for being here. I offer a lot of different little points. I hope that you picked up on what you can. If I'm allowed to speak any further later on, I definitely will. But thank you to Creative Startups. They've been a joy to work with. I worked with them in the past, and I think they're really an instigator, a real big catalyst for minds that want to go and really do things. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daryl. And shout out to Alice, who's in the chat here, co-founder of Creative Startups, CEO. And yeah, really beautiful story. And I'm struck by this theme, like you mentioned, authenticity made in Zuni, and teaching folks coming into the co-op about sort of a level of work, right? And I sort of see a theme with that, with what Sydney is talking about around sort of like a standard, like we accept, like a standard of, and maintaining a certain standard, which sort of elevates the value for everybody, right? And I'm also
Absolutely.
struck by what you talked about with this multi-generational skill sharing, and like that seems so important. And it was so cool to hear you talk about both sort of like, what the elders in the co-op can teach the young people, and then like you mentioned, like the young people with the technology and teaching, that it's an exchange, and
Yes.
like that's what the co-op brings. Yeah, and it's really cool. So thank you so much for being here and telling us about that. And then um, finishing up here, well, not finishing the whole thing, but finishing of our 3 introductions. We've got a sort of a third model. We've got Leah Wise-Surguy. Did I get it right?
Surguy.
Surguy. Okay, cool. From who is the founder of Cruces Creatives and the executive director of Cruces Creatives, and really fascinating organization based in Las Cruces. And I'll just let Leah tell you a little bit about it and what it does and how it works.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here today, and honored to be with such a creative panel that's brought so many great things to New Mexico. So I'm Leah Wise-Surguy. I'm Executive Director of Cruces Creatives, and we are a makerspace down in Las Cruces. And if you're already familiar with makerspaces, you're going to have an idea there. And I'm going to let you know what we really are is a makerspace 2.0, and I'll describe what that really means. But in my introduction today, one, I'm going to tell you a bit about Cruces Creatives. Two, I'm going to tell you a little bit on ideas on starting groups similar to like what we did. And then three, what is our model of shared creativity? So discussing Cruces Creatives, first off, we are a makerspace. We have 12,000 square feet in Las Cruces of creative space. So textile area, wood shop, jewelry lab, laser cutter, 3D printers, audio recording, photography equipment, vinyl tools, bicycle shop, electronics, robotics, just all sorts of stuff. And we try and this gets us sort of into the Makerspace 2.0. We try and model ourselves as welcoming and as expansive as we can possibly be. So whether that's poetry, or it's somebody doing jewelry, or it's somebody making music, or it's somebody who cooks, or just if you can label it creativity, awesome, welcome, come on in. And with that in mind, so this takes us into more of our 2.0, right? Where first off, we're modeling our idea of creativity super, super wide, partially because that brings community together. And when different types of creatives come together, like, I mean, it's like a good party, right? Like you never know who you're going to meet. The conversations are going to be really rich. You're going to hear about stuff you've never heard about before. All of a sudden, you know, maybe you were wearing like the super awesome sequin jacket and they were like, oh my gosh, I know the best place for you to get new shoes, right? That are going to match that, that you never would have known about if you weren't at that really cool party and met all of those people. But not only do we define ourselves really widely and also build our spaces so it like we have a dedicated kids room, so that way families come in here, our kids come in here and they feel like they can learn from people. But it's also all of these different creative types that are often coded into different ideas of culture or gender or politics, and we sort of say, nah, it's everybody, come on in, this is your space. If you're human, you're creative, right? So we start our language at a very, very wide space. And then knowing that creativity, especially big creativity, is really so difficult, right? Like one of the things that we've already heard a lot about today is essentially the administrative work, right? Like knowing who to talk to, making sure you have your paperwork correct, like how do you get funding, all of these things, right? And so we try and use our community makerspace as also a space to build programs or to launch projects or to bring people together so they can launch their own projects. So we run multiple programs in education. We run programming for sustainable agriculture and value-added culinary programs. We have people who started their own groups that just reside with us and they do charitable textile making or work on bicycles to give those out to the community. And because we handle a lot of the like nonprofit status, because we take care of things like paying rent and the insurance and the utilities. They don't have to constantly be worrying about that to even like get their start. And then we can support the moments where they say, all right, we've now developed this project, this idea, and what we really need is just funding. And we can work with them to actually do grant writing. And we have a grant writer on staff that works with individuals to then be able to help find funding too. So, all right, that was sort of an introduction to our makerspace and our sort of 2.0 model. Two, with starting. So I'm going to be able to talk more within my own journey in this, right? And so I actually have a both a bachelor's and a master of fine arts. I'm a sculptor. I loved working in really unique materials, and I'd found that when I was going to graduate, I was going to lose access to all the tools that made it possible for me to make, right? Like it, and so I started it with just bouncing the ideas with basically anybody who would listen to me. Like, this is my problem. This is what I'm trying to make. And what it helped me do, like at first, like I wanted to make a utopia. I was going to make like almost like a full community. There was going to be housing and a restaurant and like everything, right? And it helped me really focus on, yes, okay, in my own life, yes, I need housing and good food and like all of these great things, but more realistically, the shared pain point was that we didn't have tools, we didn't have space, we didn't have a creative community to bounce back and forth with, because that's where your ideas become so rich. And then realistically, and this one I discovered after we had started here, was there's also the lack of support within the administrative work, right? And knowing how to handle the paperwork or how to get the funding, or just taking care of things like insurance, because if you don't have insurance, you're really risking a lot. Okay, so that was section number 2 on ideas. Section number 3. So our model, which I've talked about a little bit in describing who we are, but we consider ourselves more of a community makerspace, right? So our model allows for a big ebb and flow. We have like 278 members of Cruces Creatives. And that is a mix of people who just have a membership to use our space, to volunteers who come every single week, to our internal staff that's included in those numbers. But then we have like our sort of expanded network, like our mailing lists and our reach of being able to communicate of about 5,000 people. So when we are doing big events, we can reach out to that giant group of people. Or if, like, one time we got a donation of like 500 records, and we were able to just throw it out to the whole group of people of being like, anybody like records? You know what I mean? Like, are your creative interests the person who wants to use 500 records to make something? And so we allow this flexibility of having multiple engagement levels, allow people to engage with us at what makes it right for them. Some people, they come in and they're immediately like, I want to be on your team. Like, what can I do? I want to make programming happen. Other people come up and they're like, here's my proposal for this program that I want to do. To other people who are just like, this is cool. How can I get involved? Be like, wonderful. We're going to cut 500 pieces of wood so it can go in an education kit for kids next week. To, I just want to stay updated and I'll hear about it. Which goes into with our programming. So we have some programs that are just constant, like our education programs. And in our education programs, we hire a lot of artists because I think they make some of the most interesting instructors, because it doesn't matter with, you know, like our STEM roles that we're trying to do, science, technology, engineering, and math, right? The moment you take art and you throw it in there to be able to help bring those subjects alive, our kiddos are getting it that much faster. to doing things like we do big mural events and we're able to pay a local artist to do big outlines, and then we invite the whole community in. To we have a program called Job Shop where it's all about customs, because being a makerspace means that people know we're just a weird catch-all of creativity. And so we've made parade floats, we've made pieces for Traveling Kids Museum, we've done encasement units. We're currently working on a proposal to make the world's largest latke. I'm hoping we get it. But so the way that we've organized ourselves as both a sort of community catch-all for creativity, but that we've also very much set ourselves up as a nonprofit and a business, means we've been able to do the gathering of people and helping them feel welcomed within the space, because we've just situated ourselves at so many different intersections. But then we've made sure, like, yes, we are a 501c3, like, yes, we do have an accountant on staff, we do have our insurance, and then we try and spread those benefits as far as we can to other creatives. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's, yeah, it's cool to hear about this model of sort of joining in order to have this space and access to the resources. And I really like what you said about, you know, we leave these sort of institutional spaces like schools, and then we're like, what happened to all this cool stuff I had access to, and now I don't have access to it anymore? Like, why does that model not continue, right? And realizing when you hit this like post, you know, secondary education world, that suddenly it's gone. And yeah, and then building it back. And yeah, it's very interesting, sort of three different visions, perspectives, you know, I would say even sort of arguably three different organization structures, right? From a pure classic co-op in Zuni, and then we have a collective in the New Mexico music workers. I think that's fair to say, right? And then Cruces Creatives is more of a like a membership co-op, right? Or a sort of membership structure, which and so I guess I'm wondering, like, if, because one thing, like when we travel throughout the state, like there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest in the idea of like, oh, I want to join like a registry, or I want to like join some collective effort. But I think that there's maybe like people don't know exactly what it is they want to join. And I wonder if any of you can speak to figuring out which kind of and I know that like Michael Murphy also asked about this, right? Like, is there like a list somewhere? And how do you know like what kind of thing you want to be a part of? Does that question make sense?
I could try to answer that from my perspective. And I'm really curious to hear what the other panelists have to say. So I think for me, the difference from your question is I had real clarity about what my motives were beforehand. And then I kind of went out and looked for it. So I don't have a registry to answer Michael's question. And my process was meeting with other music workers and talking about like our shared struggles and distilling that down into like, what is our core need here? And we went to Google and we were just typing in sort of what our needs are to see like, is anybody already doing this? And we didn't find anyone doing it here in New Mexico, but we found lots of instances of very similar struggles and addressing these struggles in other markets, most notably Seattle and Wichita, Kansas has a great collective similar to ours. So I know Instagram has changed recently. You used to be able to search by hashtags, and that was one method we were using early on to just connect with other people and other creatives. But I turned to Google and I joined the mailing list for probably like somewhere between like 20 and 30 unions, co-ops, collectives, just their mailing list, just to get their newsletter of what they're doing to stay dialed in. So the one I would recommend if you're a performing artist or musician in the audience, one that I think mirrors what we're doing in New Mexico on a national scale is the United Musicians and Allied Workers, the UMAW, and it's free to join that union. You can pay as little as $0 to join and benefit from everything that they offer. So that has been inspiring for the work that we do. But I would say my registry would just be my inbox of all of the places I've subscribed to. It's great to not duplicate work. So if we can see somebody who's already doing the work that we want to do and learn from them before we try to do it here, like what we're realizing now that we're a few months in is to meet our goals for New Mexico music workers, it's going to come down to awareness at the public awareness and persistent pressure on decision makers in New Mexico that have access to funding for our community. So it needs to be lots of people all of the time pressuring and making aware of the struggles that we're facing as creatives in the community, because if people don't know, they can't address it. So there's just that lack of awareness. So we've watched other markets do this successfully. Look, I would say most notably Colorado with their creative industries. They developed that department after pressure from the public. And it seems like from the outside looking in, it's been a huge success. So I'm curious to hear from the other panelists if you know of any registries, because my method is probably not the most efficient.
It's ambitious though. It's certainly, yeah. What do folks think? Like lists or even, you know, collectives of collectives, if you will, meta collectives. To such, I'm not sure. I mean, I put a link to there's an organization called Cooperative Catalyst. I'm not sure how active they are. But I'm sort of at a loss, and I kind of wonder if we haven't identified maybe some like a possible role, if there is a role for the creative industries division to play in this kind of establishing these lists. Because the EDD has the resource map, which is cool, but it's not geared specifically to this question, right? And so, yeah, what do other panelists sort of think? Yeah, oh, you're on mute, Daryl. You're still on mute.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Well, I just want to say I kind of fell into the arts co-op by accident. We actually had the art walk going already, and then the college here in Zuni, the Ashun College, they had funding come in, and they were working with the New Mexico Catalyst co-op Catalyst, and it worked out very well. But as art walk president, I had to begin to wonder, you know, what impact was it going to have on our collective at that moment? And they're trying to establish a new collective without really going and seeing, you know, was there a need in the community, or nobody asked me personally. But the redundancy sometimes, it happens when people aren't communicating. So as far as leadership and instances where programs do want to start off, I think that's where they need to communicate a little bit more. But in a ways, we were very fortunate and lucky, because as a collective of artists in Art Walk, we headed to the collective that they were trying to form at the co-op, and we almost really seriously got in the driver's seat. And you know, the co-op catalyst group, they helped us to really navigate the different ways to incorporate. And they finally even asked us, like, what else do you need help with? And for the longest time, as a collective, we were trying to find a building to get into in Zuni, and we did. They helped us. So the New Mexico Catalyst, we have many things to thank them for, and they're still helping us to this day. And so I think there's a chance that maybe if you're wanting to start a cooperative such as ours, you know, talking with the collective at New Mexico Catalyst Cooperatives would be great. I did something to my screen, so I'm trying to figure it out here.
No,
But
no.
anyways,
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. I think that's
yeah,
great advice. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's interesting in the ways that leadership also, you know, can forget collective. So definitely, please, as collectives, as one voice, you know, be at the councils. That for me, it's the council. I have to deal with the tribal council, and so we, in ways, you know, in passing, we may speak to them, or informal letter writing or emails. We also communicate, but just to keep up talks with your leadership is very important for collectives all over. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's cool to know that that organization is out there sort of helping, literally as in their name, catalyze, you know, these efforts. I was sort of wondering, as you guys sort of look ahead, right? And like think about the future. And I thought of it, you know, because Daryl was talking about sort of the roller coaster of numbers, right? And each of you sort of talked about like we have this many, right? And that as a sort of metric. And obviously that's, you know, of the more people you have, the better you're doing, right? But as you look forward, like does quote unquote success look different for cooperative, collective efforts than it does for, say, like an individual creative practitioner? I've given you a huge question for the last 5 minutes of the panel, but maybe somebody wants to jump in and take that.
I can try.
Because we talked about reaching new
yeah.
markets, right? Which is
So,
for an individual, it's one thing, but yeah.
I mean, I think that at least for our collective, the goal of our collective is a reflection of our individual, like we have a shared individual goal. And I think that, like, I know it's music workers, but I think this applies to any creative person. If you are a creative artist of any kind and you want to make a living from your art, you should be able to do that. So that's like the bottom line for me, is if you are a creative person and that's how you want to make a living, you should be able to make a sustainable living from your art. And I think that is the shared individual perspective that we have in our collective. And so by us sharing that individually, it becomes the collective's goal. Am I getting at your question, Mike? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think
to
being
have
able
that
to leverage that,
agree on a shared vision, I think is really interesting.
So, I think you have to have some sort of mission or objective or goal as a collective that everyone can see and know and understand for it to work. If you don't have some defining goal, you don't know what you're working towards, and then you lose that collective power. So for me, it's that I feel very passionately that everyone deserves to make a living the way that they want to. And if that's through creative arts, they should be able to do that. So, and I think that's something that many creative people can get behind. So it's pretty easy to get people on board, at least within the industry, with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Leah or Daryl, either of you like to take
Let me just
the,
add,
yeah,
that I think with take me for example, I'm one artist out of maybe 1,200, and getting together with 30 artists that I now work with, and off and on up to at least 50, we're able to open this gallery. We're able to do a little bit more things than I can possibly do for myself. And I have other people selling my wares while I'm busy working still. So, I mean, it's a give and take, but I think as we all work together for a common cause, I mean, it's really helpful, and I'm very proud of what we've done so far. Thank you.
yeah.
Weighing in, I almost want to separate out the difference between starting or running a collective or cooperative or a big community creative space versus just being a part of it. Because the beauty of just going ahead and being a part of it is, yes, absolutely, you are going to have a bigger network. You are going to hear about markets that you're not hearing about before. And not only do you get to be a part of the receiving end of it, if you become a participant to then share like, hey, I found out this thing, or I found out this resource, it becomes an even richer space that has that give and take, and then you develop community at the same time, and you're gonna feel really, really good about that. But if you are running into one of these spaces where what you're finding is you have your pain point and there are no communities that are out there, but you see where having multiple people share knowledge is that opportunity, then maybe that is the moment that you need to go ahead and become a leader in that space, because it is open at the moment. So, in some of what's been reflected before, if you see it out there, great. Maybe it's just joining it and getting access to those resources so you can just go ahead and do the creative thing. But sometimes our creative journeys are actually making the support systems to be creative. But either way, like no matter what you do, you will be bringing more community and more sharing of networks than just any one person could ever be able to do.
Absolutely. No, I mean, well said. Yeah, I think that's a great spot to end it on. And it makes sense that, like that vision is, we got 3 leaders here tonight who are able to balance that collective vision with that sort of leadership drive, right? And that leadership mentality. And so I really, really appreciate all 3 of you being here tonight to share your experiences, Sydney, Daryl, Leah. And I encourage folks who are watching to go check all these resources out. In our research, certainly we've seen that this is definitely one of the strongest paths to growing success for everybody in the creative industries in New Mexico. So I really encourage folks to, like Sydney said, see what co-ops and collectives and membership organizations are out there. If it's not, if there's a hole, like Leah's saying, like, start something, be a leader, and I think, in Daryl's story as well, about how these efforts just galvanize communities and bring everybody together. It's so important for creatives across the state. So Leah said, unfortunately, I gotta turn this on to the other one. But if we're gonna reach out, follow up, and yeah, so thank you all so much. We'll keep people connected, and we're gonna go talk about innovating cultural heritage with Henry Real and Amanda Rich of Three Sisters Kitchen. So we will see you, and thank you again to all 3 of you and everyone for joining. All right, take care. Bye.